The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to John. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed, for as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes, but Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them that he had said these things to her. The Gospel of the Lord. If you haven't seen the movie Risen already, it's worth it to go, if for no other reason than to think about the resurrection in a new way. It's a bit like CSI, but only set in ancient Jerusalem. There are these rumors, you see, that just as he had said, this man Jesus died, but then he didn't stay dead. There are reported sightings, and Clavius, a Roman soldier, has been assigned to deliver the forensic evidence, to quash the rumors, to put an end to them once and for all. And there is forensic evidence. We heard about it in our gospel lesson, the linen wrappings. I won't reveal any more in case you plan to go and see the movie. Just that no matter how Clavius tries to match the forensic evidence with the eyewitness testimony, he just can't fit it together in a nice, neat, manageable package for his boss, who is Pontius Pilate. Speaking of nice and neat, you may have heard the old, really old joke about Bob, who hired his best friend Eddie to come in to paint his back porch. Now, Bob hands over to Eddie everything that he's going to need in order to get the job done. He gives him an electric sander and some sandpaper, and he gives him brushes and tape and those stirrer things that you use to stir the paint, and he gives him a can of green paint. And a few hours later, Eddie knocks at the back door and says, "Okay, job's done, the work's over. Oh, and by the way, it's a Ferrari, not a porch." Okay, it's Easter, guys. Cut me some slack here. Cut me a little slack. But the question of mistaken identity is a central one in today's gospel, and as well as in some of the other resurrection sightings that we'll hear about later. And this whole case of mistaken identity between Mary and the resurrected Jesus is one of the most intriguing things in all of the stories about the resurrection. What keeps Mary from recognizing Jesus at the tomb? She looks right at him. So how is it that she mistakes him for a gardener? Today we celebrate the great claim that the resurrection means more than anything else in this entire world, and that it is true, that it is our truth. And not only is it a truth about a person who lived 2,000 years ago, it is also a truth about us today. Because I live, Jesus says, you also will live. And so we make the bold claim that we are Easter people. But the truth is that sometimes, like Mary, we kind of shrink wrap God and Jesus and the whole experience down to try to make it a little bit more manageable, a little more predictable, just a little bit more palatable, don't we? Even though we are capable of envisioning things that simply do not exist. For example, imagine a lake 2 miles long and 1 mile wide. The lake is made of pure hot chocolate. Planes fly over, and one after another, they dump tons of vanilla ice cream smack dab into the middle of the lake until the mountain of ice cream is stacked 75 feet high. And then, for a final touch, a helicopter lowers a huge, ginormous maraschino cherry onto the very top of the vanilla ice cream mountain. Now, we can all see it, right? But we know that it doesn't exist. We might wish that it existed, but we know that it doesn't exist. But so often the opposite is true. When we try to think of the life to come, the resurrected life that Jesus has prepared for us, even with our powerful imaginations, we are like Mary at the tomb. We measure Jesus in terms of this world. We look for the living among the dead. We look for a dead body, not a resurrected Jesus. We look for a fancy, complicated Jesus, and not a simple gardener. It's like another old joke, guys. Another old joke about Jane, who goes to heaven, and she meets St. Peter at the pearly gates. He tells her, okay, great, welcome, but before I let you in, you have to spell one word. And it can be any word you want it to be. So think of a word. So she thinks for a minute. She goes, okay, I got it. Love. I'll spell love. L-O-V-E, love. St. Peter says, okay, and he flings open the gates wide. Well done, good and faithful servant. Come on in. And then he tells Jane that he needs to take a quick coffee break. So can she stay and watch the gates for him until he comes back? So, okay, she can do that. And as she's watching, lo and behold, who should arrive at the pearly gates but Jane's ex-husband? She can't believe he's there. He can't believe he's there. Wow, he says, is it true that I actually made it to heaven? Well, not so fast, Jane says. Before I can admit you, you have to take the word test. You have to spell a word for me. Okay, he says, I can do that. I'm ready. Go ahead. Hit me with the word. What is it? And Jane pauses for a long, long moment. She thinks really, really hard. And then finally she says, Czechoslovakia. We do like to complicate things, don't we? If it's not complicated, it can't be true or real, right? The answer can't be as simple as listening to our soul, as simple as just believing Jesus' promises. there has to be something more to it. More judgment, more ritual, more rules, more regulations, right? The more conditions we can put between ourselves and Jesus the gardener, the more it saves us from facing the truth of someone who loves us so much that he dies for us. Now, our technological skills enable us to create complex computer systems, amazing rocket ships, and worldwide communications links. But intellectually, don't we sometimes try to just whittle Jesus and God down a little bit into this nice, neat package, a manageable, imaginable size? But the only problem is that what we fashion, it isn't real. What it comes down to is best expressed by the mystic Meister Eckhart, who said that the idea of God can become the final obstacle to God. Mary sees a gardener. Who do we see? A judge? A jury? A puppet who does our bidding? The face of our beloved, or the God who loves us so much he dies and rises again for us, and who calls us continually to new life, to resurrected life. Jesus says, because I live, you also will live. And we have lived through the events of this Holy Week. With him, we have passed from darkness to light, from fear to joy, from hatred to love, from death to life. The resurrection is the power of the gospel to make all things new, to transform bitterness into forgiveness and hatred into love. Easter is not about the denial of death. Death is real. Betrayal is real. Abandonment is real. Sin is real. But this day, Easter is about faith in a God who has overcome all those things. Resurrection happens every moment, but we need not only to believe it, but also to live it. And the question is, can we believe it? Episcopal author Nora Gallagher talks about coming to terms with her own life after her brother's death. In her book called Practicing Resurrection, she says, if there is some kind of life after death, what if it's not a life exclusively for the dead? What if it's a life available to all of us, something the living can participate in too? What if the resurrection is not about the appearances of Jesus alone, but also about what those appearances point to, what they ask of us? And it is finally what we do with them that matters, whether we make them into superstitions or use them as stepping stones to new life. She says that we must practice resurrection. I believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, not just as a spiritual resurrection, but a physical one, a bodily one. I believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, not just as a statement we make when reciting an ancient creed. I believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, not just as metaphor, but as a fact that makes my life make sense. It makes the most important relationships in my life make sense. It explains for me how the church has survived 2,000 years. Because in case you haven't noticed, we're not exactly the most organized or orderly group of folks on the planet. In fact, those first disciples included a betrayer, a doubter, a denier. I believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, not just to explain life after death, but to explain death and life in the midst of living. It's how we make sense of the tragedies in our lives, how we are able to find peace in the midst of Brussels and San Bernardino, and even I just heard Pakistan today, another bombing, 50 dead. Or Charleston, South Carolina, in the midst of this very, very strange political climate we find ourselves, in the midst of all the turbulence of our times. Thousands of years ago, broken-hearted and weeping women went to a tomb, they thought, to close the book on Jesus, the Messiah. Instead, they wrote a whole new chapter. So what about it? What about you today? If the stone has been rolled away, are you ready to come out of the tomb? If death has been swallowed up by victory, are you ready to rejoice? And if Jesus can call his betrayers brothers, are you willing to actively love others and to live in the power of the resurrection? The great claim we make this day is that the resurrection matters more than anything else in the world, and it is true. It is our truth. The great claim of this day is that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and because he lives, we live. And that makes us Easter people. Hallelujah! Christ is risen!